Are you having trouble learning Chinese? You spend hours learning the tones, but you don't see any difference. After months, you can still only say the basic stuff like hello and how are you. You can neither use nor understand Chinese. In today's video, I'm going to explain how to learn Chinese by breaking the language down to 3 parts: the alphabet, grammar, and the characters. For each part, you will get one rule so that you can truly see how the language becomes easy to learn. Hi, I'm Qi from Deepling. I'm a course designer to make Chinese easy. Since 2014, I have been designing online courses to make Chinese easy for beginners. 2021, I made a New Year resolution to make my content available in English and for free on YouTube. So if you want to learn Chinese and haven't found the right place, subscribe and follow me. You'll be surprised how much you can learn online. Now let's get back to the 3 parts that make up a language. This video breaks Chinese into 3 parts. 1. The alphabet. How to document Chinese as a beginner fast. And 2. Grammar. How to build sentences in Chinese as a beginner fast. And 3. The characters. How to remember the Chinese characters as many and as fast as possible. Now let's finally get started with how to learn Chinese properly. So my first advice on how to learn Chinese as a beginner is to learn the Chinese alphabet so well that you can use it for documentation. Don't invent a new system. Get used to the one invented by experts. I know, Chinese is not an alphabet language and doesn't work like one. I'm planning another video to explain how Chinese works with its spoken and written languages. Yes, languages. But for now, the first thing you need to know is that Chinese does have an alphabet system that describes the pronunciation of all characters, which is called Pinyin. Pinyin means literally spell, sound. The use of Pinyin is a pragmatic one. People use it to describe the pronunciation of characters, not just for non-Chinese speakers. It's for everyone. I like describing Pinyin as the Chinese alphabet because it can be used as a language. When I was little and needed to leave a message to my parents while I couldn't write the most characters, I always used Pinyin. It fulfills the basic purpose of communication. So what does Pinyin look like? Pinyin consists of 29 alphabets. 5 of which you need to practice. Among these 5, only 1 does not exist in English. The other 4 have equivalents for replacement. Ü is the only pronunciation that does not exist in English, but it exists in many other languages such as German, French, or Turkish. You need about 2 hours to remember the most typical combinations and how to pronounce them all. The reason why I insist on Pinyin's importance is that you can use it instantly as a tool for documentation. It is just like a normal alphabet system, and after a general walkthrough, you will be able to instantly write down anything in Chinese. Yes, it's Pinyin, but it's still Chinese. If you're interested, I have prepared a free exercise for you to walk through the learning process. Click here to practice. It's an interactive quiz with real-time feedback so that training is more efficient. But even without learning anything, you can manage 80 to 90% of Pinyin as it follows 100% of the English pronunciation. For those who might not know, the creation of Pinyin is based on English. So the first step is to learn this Pinyin chart. But here's the trick. Some of you already know that Chinese has tones, and here comes the first unconventional part. I'm asking you to skip the tones. Instead, spell everything you learned correctly. Focus on the correctness of spelling, not the tones. Which makes it the perfect timing to introduce the first rule. Always make sure you spell right. Forget the characters, forget the tones. The only thing that matters now is the 100% correctness of spelling. This is because you will need the correct combination to use Chinese input on digital devices later. Ideally, you can always spell the pinyin whenever you hear something in Chinese. If that's too hard, at least make sure you spell everything you learned correctly. If you can manage the tones, I can't forbid you, but this should never be at the cost of correct spelling. Just like when you learn German or Spanish, you would never ignore the importance of spelling. I'm surprised by how often people skip pinyin and use their invented systems. Let's say when you hear a sentence, 我今天去学校了. When you hear this, you should be able to type down 我今天去学校了, or with spaces in between, 我今天去学校了. Before you've reached this level, characters shouldn't be in the game. And if you manage to write down the correct tones but fail to spell correctly, it is a sign that you leave the tones and focus on the spelling. Because combinations like this can't get you anywhere. Now we've come to the second part, building sentences, because this is what grammar should be about. And building sentences is probably the most difficult part about Chinese because it's easy. On one hand, it looks like a baby language that puts words randomly together. But on the other hand, if you do exactly the same, it doesn't always work. The chances are 50-50. It could be right, could be wrong. Let's say you've just learned to say hello, 你好, which means literally, you good. And then you learned how are you is 你好吗? Ma works as a question mark, meaning you good, huh? So you think the logical answer would be I'm fine, I'm good, so 我是好. And that's wrong. You should say 我很好, as in I very good, and not I am good. This is because your entire language system is based on the English language, and you are just trying to translate it. To build Chinese sentences, you need a Chinese language system, not an English one. Let me first introduce the second rule. Learn entire sentences and replace similar elements each time. This is how you build new sentences first. Let's say you've just learned the conversation. 你好吗? 我很好. What you shouldn't do is to build new sentences with your English structure, such as I am fine. Instead, you should first remember these two sentences and then replace the basic elements. 你好吗? 你高兴吗? 你舒服吗? 他好吗? 爸爸好吗? 奶奶伤心吗? There are many possible combinations. If you're learning by yourself without any teaching material, use Google or a dictionary to find more words to replace. But seriously, stick to the original sentences. Is there any way to make this process even easier? If you asked me in 2014, I'd say no. Back then, I designed a course that collected as many typical sentences as possible, altogether 360 sentences, so that you gain a feeling for the language to build sentences by yourself. However, in between, I have developed a new system called the Blueprint for Chinese. The Blueprint works as a layout of the language. It first breaks the language into two groups, statements and questions. For beginners, it's more than enough to know how to build these two kinds of sentences. A statement only works as stating a fact, while a question raises a conversation that requires an answer. Based on that, the blueprint then breaks the statements into 4 different kinds. It also breaks the question into 4 kinds. I don't want to spend too much time to go even deeper on the system, but I promise I will make 5 further videos explaining the blueprint to cover all possible sentence structures. But if you can't wait, I also prepared a free exercise for you to walk through the blueprint. The only thing important here is to have feedback. That's why I designed the practice to provide more feedback. But if you have Chinese friends who can tell you if the sentence makes sense, that would work perfectly as well. Characters are probably the main reason why Chinese gets the reputation of being the hardest language to learn. And indeed, it requires a lot of time. So I will first reveal the rule before I explain why. How to remember the Chinese characters as many and as fast as possible. Only start memorizing the characters when the pinyin has become part of your Chinese vocabulary. Whenever you see the English word, you know the pinyin without thinking. Only then, it's time to move on to the characters. Let's take 你好 as an example again. Before you've memorized hello is 你好, don't start with the characters. Only if you know how to translate hello, which is 你好, and you can always type and write it correctly in pinyin, you can start the process. Now, let me explain why. This will take some time, but in my experience, only if you understand why, you will truly do it as indicated, because now you're convinced. So please bear with me and try to understand why. So if a Chinese native speaker sees a word, let's say 你, it's not a natural thing that we automatically know that it's pronounced as 你. The only reason we don't need pinyin anymore is just because we repeat it so often that we remembered it. It's just like how you learned spell you when you went to school. And we learned how to pronounce and write that character. The only difference is you have an indicator. The pronunciation you is connected to its written form you, which gives you some hint on how to spell it, while in Chinese, there is no indicator. Either you know it or not. That is why learning the characters is an accumulating process, because no one can skip this step. If you want to be able to read and write, you do need to remember every character. And this is challenging for beginners because it means you need to learn 2 things at the same time. 1. The pronunciation, and 2, the characters. They are not linked to each other. Imagine you are an English native speaker trying to learn the word potato in another language. Now, first imagine you are learning German. And now imagine what you need to learn would be this. Since you don't know how to pronounce it, they mark it as Kartoffel. The O is written this way to clarify that the intonation falls on awful, so it's not pronounced as Kartoffel, but Kartoffel. But people wouldn't write the pronunciation of the word most of the time because the native speakers have remembered that this is pronounced as Kartoffel. So whenever you see the word, you pronounce Kartoffel because you know it's pronounced this way. In fact, Latin words like eg or ie work just like this. The correct way to pronounce this is for example. And for this is that is to say. Now let's replace Kartoffel with the real Chinese word 土豆. The question now is only, should you remember all the things at one time like this? Or should you remember them one after another? Potato, 土豆, and the characters.
土豆 is not more difficult than Kartoffel. The characters are. I would always suggest learning one thing at a time.
First, make sure you have memorized this combination. Potato is 土豆. Make sure 土豆 becomes a vocabulary that you own. Whenever you see this, you say 土豆. Only then you can start with memorizing the characters. And the best way then is to put them into entire sentences, as I already introduced in the first part. Do this. Then this. Don't do this.
The work that needs to be done then is simple. See them as often as possible. If I may add one more thing here, skip the radicals for a more efficient learning process. Radicals describe how to write the characters correctly. Unless you really want to be able to write with a pen, I suggest that you skip the radicals, because here, the only thing that matters now is to recognize the characters while typing. Now I want to summarize this video. The ultimate guide for beginners to learn Chinese include 3 rules to follow.
Now let's first recall the 3 topics we covered: the alphabet, grammar, and the characters. 1. Make sure you spell right. Start from day 1 to write everything down in Pinyin correctly. Get used to it. 2. Learn only entire sentences. Replace a similar word in the old sentence. This is the only way to create new sentences. And 3. Only start with the characters when you truly know its Pinyin well. If you're still making spelling mistakes, go back to Pinyin, the alphabet.
I will keep publishing videos with both learning material as well as how-tos. So if you're learning Chinese, make sure you subscribe and also hit the notification button. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. You can also visit my website deepling.org for the download material. I'll see you next Friday. And remember, together we can make Chinese easy.